welcome to the podcast. This show is entirely dedicated to the wisdom and the stories of people embracing their true and extraordinary nature, of overcoming, breaking through limits, tapping into universal wisdom, and hopefully inspiring you to do the same.
All right, welcome. Today is a solo cast, and honestly, I can't tell you how many times I have stopped recording and restarted this podcast. For what reason, I don't know. I guess this is just what happens when I don't have someone on the other end forcing me to just roll with the punches. My Virgo moon perfectionism came out, but you know what? This is the episode. I'm not going to stop it, and I'm not going to start again. You get what you get. So I wanted to do this episode because I noticed something in the collective, I noticed something in my life, and I noticed something with the people around me that I feel needs to be explained or highlighted with the intention of allowing us to move more consciously through our lives and with the goal of becoming more free. So this episode is really about past lives, karmic healing, and what I would call timeline seeping, where your soul in a different reality is experiencing something very challenging and it kind of knocks you like a ton of bricks in your current reality. So it's all connected, and I have to take you on a bit of a journey to get there, but we're going to get there. So first of all, here's what I noticed in the collective. As I record this, we're just on the other side of Cancer season. And Cancer season can be a little bit unpredictable because it is ruled by the moon. And I'll get back to that in a moment. But what I seen happening with people was a lot of body pain, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of bizarre dreams, a lot of old emotions bubbling to the surface, and stormy emotions that didn't feel like they were in reflecting the reality we are in. Even speaking for myself, I went through this feeling of like melancholy and depression. And I often feel this way at the beginning of summer, and I've often thought I had like seasonal depression, but really what it is Cancer comes and gets me. But when I feel this melancholy or depression, it's really not tied to any event that I'm currently experiencing. It's bubbling through an old timeline, from past lives, from karmic baggage, all this kind of stuff. So I wasn't the only person experiencing body pains, experiencing unplaceable emotions, and it really throws people for a loop, and even me for a loop, even though I should know better. So it does often become exacerbated in Cancer season because Cancer season is ruled by the moon. I'm not someone who's going to sit here and talk astrology with you all day, but I do believe that the planet and luminaries are extreme teachers for us on this planet. And it doesn't matter if you believe in astrology or not, they're still here to teach you. They influence you every single day of your life. You know, we know what the moon does to the tides. What do you think it does to you? There's no way it doesn't influence you whether you believe in it or not. So what does the moon rule over in the realm of teaching? The moon is very dynamic. It has many layers. So the moon is often seen as like the grandmother moon or the mother. And what does the mother really do as an archetype? I'm not talking about your actual mother. I'm talking about as an archetype. She is responsible for your roots, for your first knowing of home. And if you imagine when I say roots, a tree growing down to anchor itself into the earth so that it can grow big, strong, and tall in the outer world as we grow into adults. And this moon energy is here to help us ground and anchor ourselves into something solid, something we trust. It's where we pull sources of nourishment. It's where we learn to feel solid or safe or feel uncertain and ungrounded. And these root systems are very karmic. There are earliest impressions in this lifetime and others. And the root system of karma can really be seen in three different layers, three different root systems, and they're all one and the same and cause and affect each other. So when Cancer season comes about, We're influenced by these root systems that we have in our story. And the moon also has a lot of phases. And in certain phases, it casts a lot of illusion. And it has no light of its own, right? It's reflecting. So we can't always see what's really clear when the moon is around. We don't always know what's ours, what's inherited, what's circumstantial. It can be very confusing, right? Just like when the moon is in its crescent form, it looks like that's all there is, but there's always so much more to the moon. So in that sense, the moon does rule over our subconscious, the things that we can't truly see that do drive our reactions, our emotions, our experiences that we can't fully understand, we can't fully see. And the moon also is historically known as a timekeeper, right? Time was measured in moon cycles, a fortnight in 2 moon cycles, it denoted harvest time. It denoted so many things, and it was known as the timekeeper. So if you think about that in just everyday terms, the moon rules over our history, our time, our past, which is related to past lives. It is related to our upbringing, our childhood years, and it is also related to our ancestral karma, our ancestral lineages where certain stories and survival instincts have been passed through our cellular DNA. And it rules over our shadow, our subconscious. These are things that we can't always see very clearly, but they do have massive impacts on us and the way that we react and the way that we exist. So when Cancer season comes along, oftentimes things that are hidden from the past are trying to come to the surface in order to be given light, in order to be given consciousness, in order to be given an understanding. But if it exists in our subconscious, it needs to get our attention in kind of strange ways. Weird emotions, body pain, certain circumstances arising that force us to transcend an old loop, an old pattern behavior, an old survival programming that maybe we didn't even realize we were experiencing. And watching myself, watching other people around me bump into these confusing and conflicting energies, I really wanted to talk about how this stuff seeps into our present moment and why it does that and what it's asking us to do. I'll just pin it right there. But before I even move on, I think sometimes when people are on their healing journey, they often think about looking into the past as holding on to an old story or re-traumatizing themselves or getting hung on victimization from different experiences. And depending upon your lens and how you dive into the past and into your timelines, yeah, that can be true. People can choose to do that, and it's not beneficial. It's really not beneficial to make a story about yourself limit you in the present. That's not helpful. But it might not be no surprise, I'm a karmic healer. This is my favorite thing, and I do specialize in diving into the past. But it's not with the intention of getting lost and hung up in these areas. The intention is, if we could look into the past and really bring to light some of the experiences that we did have in childhood, that we did have in our ancestral experiences, that we do have in our past lives, it's going to explain and illuminate so much about what's really happening in our present moment. Because what is unhealed repeats until it does. Rise or repeat, rise or repeat, rise or repeat. So what happened in these 3 root systems, which is childhood, 0 to 7, the ancestrals, and the past lives, will tell you an incredible amount about what kind of things are happening to you right now. And right now is the only place that you have any power, that we have any power. We only have power in the present moment to rise or repeat. And with the intention of empowering you right now to make the decisions that break these old loops, break these old survival systems that are really not serving you in order for you to create and attract the future that you're trying to create. We think about that tree again. Our roots, our root system, our ability to nourish ourselves, the things that remain hidden, the things that remain under the ground, the things that make us feel strong or weak, will directly influence our ability to reach for the sun, to grow big, strong, and tall, to have strength, to have what we want. And when I say that, I metaphorically mean the sun as in the creative life that we want to have, right? The money, the health, the happiness, the relationships, the freedom, the inner peace, the connections, all these beautiful things that you want to experience in your life will be determined on what you choose in the present moment. And 90% of the time, what we're choosing in the present moment is dictated upon these past survival stories, these past fear stories, right? Think about it. You may have a grandmother who survived World War II, and she may have had to flee. She probably didn't maybe eat as often or frequently as she needed to. So she learned how to train her body to be in preserve mode, where it doesn't release excess weight or nourishment. It hangs onto it for dear life. And it has a flight response. Well, that lives in your blood too. And without even consciously knowing it, you may have this knee-jerk reaction to just flee from situations. You may not want to make solid ties with people. You may be a relationship saboteur. You may be someone who can only feel happiness when you have some type of exciting trip planned or event planned, and you can't be in the present moment. You can't appreciate where you're at now. You're a goal getter, but every goal you achieve, it doesn't mean anything to you. It's like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And you may have this inability to lose weight or to release things from your body because there's memories that have traveled through your DNA of not knowing where the next meal is, and knowing that we can't set up roots because roots and being stagnant makes us easier to capture. And you'll be doing all these things that really don't make sense for what's really going on in your immediate environment. And it is the thief of joy. It is the thief of presence. And it can honestly be the thief of health and well-being and these things that everybody really wants. When Cancer season comes a-knocking, it often does try really hard to send these subconscious things to the surface in order to show us something that's not working in our favor, that's bogging us down, that is making our life more restrictive and challenging. And it needs to get our attention somehow. So it often does use emotions, these emotions from the past, these fears of abandonment, these needing to flee, this anxiety that we can't place for what's happening in our current life. Or some people often experience the emotions traveling through the body. So all of a sudden your shoulder is pinched and you are achy and stiff, and it's really telling you, very symbolically, the weight you're carrying, the load you're carrying, the responsibilities you're carrying is too heavy. Where does this innate programming to take on too much come from? Where does it come from? Let's pay attention to it. And then sometimes in extreme examples, and it doesn't just have to be in Cancer season, we will bump into events, negative events, painful events that force us to stop from our day-to-day existence of just routine and not living consciously and repeating these loops. And it will force us to stop and look. And I know that every single person listening has had one of those experiences. A car accident, failing a grade, losing a job, a breakup, that forces you to be like, why did that happen? And if you actually took the time to reflect, you would likely have become very aware of a certain type of loop or programming that isn't serving you. It's really important to note that you can run, but you can't hide from healing these karmic loops. It's a part of the earth experience. It's a part of the reason that we're here. It's actually the reason that you were born to the family that you were born to. You guys have shared karma, both personal and as a collective. And I'll break everything down, but we have to let it unfold like a rose because I can't say everything at once. So it's a part of the game. And oftentimes we've seen and experienced and witnessed people just living on autopilot, letting these subconscious survival programs from the past really dictate our life. But depending on when you were born, I don't know the exact date. I should have looked it up, but I didn't. I'll put it in the notes below. There's a generation that a lot of us are a part of, and it's the millennial generation, I believe, would probably be the date. So it's probably like 1983 or 80 to like almost like 2000. So I'll give the dates, they'll be in the links. So people kind of born in this timeline, you actually came here as karmic healers. So if you were born in this window, double check the notes below for the actual dates. This is why you came here. And you've probably already witnessed that you could try really hard to live on autopilot, but it just didn't last for very long. And this is also why the millennial generation has been through so many crazy events. Y2K, 9/11, like World War III is impending, all these really difficult things is because we are meant to resolve things. And it's a beautiful thing to be strong enough to manage that. Absolutely. But the second piece of it is when we look, let's say, to our parent generation, they could live on autopilot for basically the duration of their whole life, right? When I think about my parents, life is not comfortable for them. That's to say the least. But there's really not been a lot of alarm bells that have went off in their life that would have forced them to look at these things. But for us, the alarm bells won't stop because it's our responsibility. And every generation has a responsibility. I can list a couple in the vicinity, maybe the one right before us and the one right after, just to show you that everyone has a big role to play. But this happens to be the millennial generation and what they're playing. You can run, but you can't always hide. And I think it's extremely powerful to be able to look into our past, into our karma, and make sense of it because it does empower us and show us the exact loop, the exact survival skill that needs to be released in order to feel healed, in order to feel that freedom, that absolute presence and peace that is so elusive for, in particular, the generation that came as the karmic cleanup. So you can run, you can't hide, it's going to happen. And the generations coming after us, anyone born, after 2000 or whatever, it's still in your boat as well to be able to do that because every generation gives a gift to the next one. And the gift that the millennials will give to the future generations is that of healing trauma, of needing to heal trauma. Hopefully they don't have as much to heal because we cleaned a lot of it up, but we will give them that gift, right? And just think about that historically, right? When our parents existed, there wasn't things like, mental health and trauma release and somatic healing and meditation. Like that kind of wasn't a thing for them. It was just all about survival. So we've created this space for healing and they get to receive that as well. But it won't be their main story. It's just a gift that we'll give to them. So when we look at karma and the root system and the moon wanting us to heal these survival programmings, I'm going to touch a little bit on the 3 root systems and how they're connected, how ancestral karma is also connected to your past lives, and how your past lives actually also influence what your childhood is going to look like. It's all connected, and it's all going to start to paint a very similar picture. So I'm going to try to explain each 3 of the root systems and how they cause and affect each other, and then why it has to seep through and why we're here to release it. And if you're not a millennial, it doesn't matter. You're still going to benefit from this information. It's just, I think that the millennials will be like, oh my God, this is why this always happens to me, why I'm never content, why every emotion bubbles to the surface, why everything feels harder for me. And I can just watch my parents live very subconsciously, moment to moment, survival skill to survival skill, and they don't meet the same repercussions that I do? Well, here's why. So, the 3 root systems, as I've alluded to, are your past lives, your childhood, and your ancestral connection. So, let's start with past lives because it's kind of where I started. So, what are past lives, and why does the pain of the past that is clearly hidden still influence us in the present? Why? So, past lives kind of start like this. When we're on the spirit side, we know everything that there is to know. We know what courage is, what victory, what loss, what grief is, as a concept. But when we're on the spirit side, everything is beautiful and fluffy and light and love and euphoria every day. So there's never going to be an opportunity to actually feel courageous, feel victorious, feel grief or loss. So it just exists as a concept that we understand as a definition, but not really anything further than that. And that's a huge curiosity for us as spirit. And I want to just paint an example, even on Earth, that happens. So if you think back, just a random example, to when you were a small child, and let's say your friend had a dog pass away or a grandparent pass away, and you watched them experience a lot of grief and sadness, and you probably felt the sympathy for them. You didn't want them to experience that pain. But at a certain point, you might have been like, I'm not really sad that your grandma died, and I'm not really sad that your dog didn't make it. Like, come on, get over it, until, little you experiences the loss of your grandparent or your dog. Oh, that hurts. You get it now. Why your friend couldn't play with you a recess for a week because they were so despondent. Like, we've all had an experience like that where we could really judge it from the outside because it didn't happen to us, and then it happens to us, and suddenly we're not so judgmental because we're like, oof, I get it. It's the same thing on the spirit side. So eventually, curiosity gets the better of us, and we're like, yeah, I think I'm ready to actually experience courage. Or grief. I kind of want to know what's the big idea about grief. And thus we go to the drawing board and we begin to craft an incarnation for ourselves. And we literally write the script, write the plan. And you can think of it like you're going to be the star. You're also going to cast in, the journey, what you're going to experience, how you're going to be courageous, how you're going to persevere through your grief, who's going to be your partner, who's your antagonist. You're the star, you're the writer, you're the cast and crew, you hire them. This is your journey, and you then contract out, make these deals. Can you do this with me? Do you want to work this out? How can we help your soul grow through this experience? And then we're like ready to go. We're like, yep, I'm doing it. I'm going to Earth. But once we get here, the funny thing is we don't get to remember what that plan is, and we get free will. And it's kind of a part of the test, like, will I do the things I hope to do, even though I can't really remember what I'm doing? Will I use my free will and honor my spirit, honor my journey, honor my truth? So we get here, and as you can imagine, we're as free as we've ever been in recent history, which isn't always all that free. So in past lives, let's say you were a woman, where women were considered property, and you were like, I'm going to be courageous. But then someone told you couldn't, that wasn't the realm of women, and you believed them, so therefore you didn't. Or maybe you felt the experience of grief, but you were never able to move through it or make sense of it. And then you finish your lifetime and you get to do this grand review, and you realize you never went for the courage and you got swallowed up by grief. And you could never move through it or make sense of it, and it became your story instead of just a part of your story. Well, guess what? You're not satisfied with that type of experience. You're not happy with what really took place. So you go back to the drawing board and you're going back in. You're going to get it right this time. But what you'll do is you will rewrite the same challenge in. The same person or the same type of story that told you that you were not supposed to be courageous. You were supposed to be in the kitchen cooking and cleaning. Or you'll experience the same trigger that puts you into a spiral of grief, but this time you'll try to put things into place so that you can move through it, that you can get to the other side, that you can do what needs to be done. But you will face that obstacle again with the intention of prevailing upon it and creating the outcome that you want. But of course, karma compounds, the pain compounds, and it gets kind of harder each time we do it. But also, it gets more uncomfortable each time we do it, forcing us to hopefully grow. So right there, from the very bird's eye perspective, this is why certain things consistently keep happening to you lifetime from lifetime or year to year, and it's asking you to choose the different thing. But here's the catch. When we chickened out of being courageous, it's likely because we felt that being courageous was going to cost us something that mattered a lot. That if we became the adventure spirit in a time when women were meant to be servants, we could have lost our husbands, which means we could have lost our roof, our food, our way of being, and we could have been judged by other women. And really, at the end of the day, we might have had courage, but we wouldn't have had anything else. We could have lost the things that we really depended on for our survival, like a house and income and food, Women weren't really permitted to work for a long period in time. So we told ourselves in that lifetime that staying in a certain situation equals safety, survival instinct. So then when we're facing the obstacle in a more modern lifetime where women are able to do courageous things now and earn their own money and do all these types of things, it's just an example. It's not meant to be the narrative of the story. But then we're still faced with these weird limiting beliefs or feelings that something very bad is going to happen if we really took up the space and went after what we wanted. Even though logically speaking, there's nothing in our immediate life that denotes nobody would support us. How many limiting beliefs do you have that you actually have no evidence of? I have this nagging one, and it's just incredibly annoying. And it comes up all the time, even though I know it's not true. I have this feeling inside of my soul that I'm just inherently unlovable. There's a line in a Noah Kahan song, and it's like, if you get too close and I'm not how you hoped, sorry, And so it's almost like you might as well just stay away from people. You might as well just not get too close. You might as well not invest too much in people, because eventually they're going to see that you're not really that awesome, and you might as well save yourself pain. There is nothing in my current reality that would suggest that's at all true. But I will still consistently keep people as far away. I'll kind of isolate sometimes. And it's from these past lives in which something like that did occur. And to me, it's like this survival programming. You don't want to feel the pain? Well, don't go too deep, And we all have something like this. And that's root system number 1. Okay, so root system number 2, let's go into our childhood. So I'm not an expert on this. It's I'm more an expert of the past lives, but it's a known or accepted theory that the subconsciousness of a child is created from the ages 0 to 7. And that anything that takes place while a child is 0 to 7 will go immediately into developing their subconscious, which is it's the hidden motivators. It's the hidden beliefs, the hidden ways in which that child will consistently make the rest of their decisions off of the duration of their life. So something as simple as I have one memory where I was trying to get my mom's attention. I was like, Mom, pick me up, pay attention to me, hello. And she was just having a moment. She was overwhelmed, and she just told, she ignored me and kind of walked away from me and, was just and I have these memories because first of all, I have a great memory. I actually remember things from probably the age of 2. But I've also done a lot of my own diving into the past. So sometimes these memories will come up. But anyways, and she kind of just walked past me and ignored me. And I, in this 1-year-old, 2-year-old stance was oh, I'm kind of annoying or I'm a burden in some way. I'm inconveniencing my own mother. So it goes right into the subconscious, right? At 1 and 2 years old, we don't even have the language to formulate an actual belief, but it still imprints into the subconsciousness of that child. And for the rest of their life, they will likely have this unknown reason as to why they won't ask for help, or they feel like they need to be really helpful, really a high achiever in order to show everyone that they're not a burden. They actually add things to other people's lives. Look, I'm helpful. Look, aren't you happy I'm here instead of annoyed that I'm here? I'm helping you. And look, I'm a straight A student. You don't have to work on me. I don't need anything. Look at me. I'm perfect, right? And that's what in some ways develops, I don't want to say our personality, but develops the way that we engage in life. And it is a prison. It's a prison, right? Putting that amount of pressure on yourself to be a straight A student or consistently always be helpful instead of asking for help, eventually as an adult, that is going to blow back in your face and it's going to be so exhausting. But without that awareness of what took place in the past, even on a simple level, not a specific event like that, why we do the things we do isn't always clear. And I guarantee you, if you're someone listening who you're like a type A, really helpful, straight A student, I'm sure you've already bumped into a situation in which you couldn't meet those own standards for yourself, or you really, really needed help. And you had to face your incredulous fear of being vulnerable, of having to ask or let somebody in to actually help you. And you probably felt like a burden. And it made you scream and squirm. And if you didn't learn what that cycle was, as soon as you got better, you probably felt like you owed the people that helped you. When really, all along, it was trying to show you that you can ask for help and people are still going to love you. That you can be vulnerable, that you can express your needs, that you can be as imperfect as anyone else, and it doesn't change your worth. Your worth is inherent. And whatever you are is what's divine, is what's beautiful, is what's perfect. That's what it was trying to show you. But most of us don't stop long enough to really understand what happened. And then 10 years later, 5 years later, another situation happens, and this time it's even worse, even more debilitating. And it will just keep on happening until you learn that you need to stop that. You need to stop being what everybody else needs you to be, and you need to take up space and go after what you want and be courageous and know that you're loved for the individuated self that you are. And the way that past lives connect to that subconscious root system when we're 0 to 7 in this lifetime is that where you end off in your past life, you will pick back up on in your current life. So if you died in a past life without ever learning the lesson that your worth is inherent and that you're not a burden and you don't have to be subservient to your husband and play the role that he wants you to be and be the doting wife and don't be too needy and just make dinner, have the house clean, and sleep with him when he asks for it, you can keep that roof over your head. Don't think about me. Don't think about my courageous life. Don't take chances. Don't take risks. Just play the role. Play the role really well. If you die without figuring out that loop, well, in the next lifetime, you will be born to a family that will perpetuate that you need to fit in some type of box and not be a burden and actually be helpful and pretty and easy in order to receive any type of love. And so your subconscious, your childhood experiences from 0 to 7 will mirror the same story that you left off on. And the harsher you were to yourself in a past life, or the harsher the beliefs or the survival skills were in a past life, the harsher and more challenging your 0 to 7 or your childhood will be in this lifetime. And I'm just going to just in parentheses, that's not always the case for everybody. there's also people that take on different things for different reasons, and they have challenging lifetimes for reasons that aren't necessarily karmic. And two examples of that are there are some people who are just strong enough, powerful enough. They are a transformer, a healer, and they almost take on difficult incarnations. It's like, I volunteer as tribute. I'll take it on because I know I'm strong enough to transform this. And when I do, I will be a guiding light for everyone else. And another example is sometimes people just like a challenge. Like they just want to see what they can take on and get away with. They're kind of like, the tricks, the funny guys who are like, I'm going to take it on and see what happens. And it's kind of like, let's just see, and they just take it on to see what they can accomplish with it. So there are people that aren't necessarily working out these karmic loops, but they're probably creating some, So that's how those connect. And then let's bring in the ancestors, the generational trauma, the cellular DNA memory. And how does that influence us? Okay, well, just like we had this grandmother, that grandmother in these past lives who was escaping, World War II, and her body she's holding on to every piece of nourishment, every calorie, because she doesn't know when she's going to eat again, and she's in this fleeing endeavor, this fleeing response. Well, that is going to be encoded and encrypted into the DNA that gets passed down, right? Survival of the fittest, the evolution, right? Like that's what kept her alive when many other people died. So it's coded very loud into the cellular DNA, and it gets passed down generation from generation because that's how we survived. And it can be connected to, evolution and Darwinism, where the people that the birds, I can't remember the story, but it's like the birds that developed a certain type of beak were able to actually stay alive. So they were like, hey, that's how the species survived. So we're going to pass it on to our children because they need to have that skill as well. So it's almost like creation and evolution work together, but in some senses of the word, like you really got to cherry pick from each story, but it does have truth. So this comes down in our DNA, and it gets passed down generation to generation to generation to generation. And there's a couple ways that this connects with the overall story of past lives and childhood, but let me take you there. It's a bit of a journey. So anyway, in your blood, in your body, in your physicality, you will have this fleeing narrative. And the way that it would tie into, let's say, our theme of perfectionism, okay, or our theme of being very helpful, is that it would likely be very challenging to keep up the role or the lens of being perfect. So you would keep your circle very small. And then anytime somebody ever learned something about you that wasn't, they saw a negative side of you or something that wasn't perfect, it's likely that you would have eventually cut those people out of your life or ran away from them or sabotaged that relationship before it even got started because you couldn't keep up that illusion. So there's that flight. Oh, I can't manage this. I'm just going to get the heck out of here. And then we have this flight response that we're always in, and we're sabotaging relationships and all that stuff. And then, yeah, like I said, we can't lose weight. We had a survival story, and it doesn't really make sense. It's subconscious. It's in the dark. It's in the shadows. So how does this connect to the overall past lives and subconsciousness of the childhood? So first of all, when we go into the creator life, remember when we're on the spirit side and we're making up our lifetime, we often incarnate with the people we really love. They're our soul family. They're the people that we love, we jive with. And we cast them into a multitude of different roles. And we kind of recycle them from lifetime to lifetime. So in one lifetime, you guys are going to be married. In the next lifetime, he's going to be your brother. Then in the next lifetime, he's going to be your father. And, there's going to be all these shuffles. And I'm just using one person, but there's like a cohort of you. There's probably like 40 of you, for example. I really don't know how many there is, that constantly incarnate in each other's lives and play roles. And the roles change. So first of all, when you're in your current incarnation, your family members and the people that you're playing out these stories with are likely a part of the cohort that plays in your story lifetime from lifetime to lifetime. So the ancestors are not random. They're the same people that you're constantly working with. So your karma is all intermingled anyway. So there's like that shared karma, that like repetitious karma, where you're doing it all over again. And there's oftentimes like a specific skill or a specific story that just won't hash out for everybody. So you end up repeating very similar stories just in different timelines over and over and over again, knowing that they do shuffle. Who your mom was in a past life, maybe she's not in this lifetime, and maybe 5 lifetimes ago she was your sister. Like it does recycle. It's not always the exact story. So that's how our past lives are connected to our ancestors. And oftentimes, this isn't an absolute, but lately I've really noticed people incarnating into the same generational line. But let's say you're you in this lifetime, but you were also your great grandmother who you never met because she died before you were born. Well, that's because she was you. Or you were the great 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 grandmother or grandfather, and you're recycled down the line and you're coming back. So knowing our ancestors, knowing where we come from, knowing what lives in our blood, knowing what stories live in our timeline depicts what is living inside of our cells and our DNA, but it also may show you who you were and where you were and what challenges your soul had in older lifetimes. It's not always like that. It really depends, but we do incarnate with the same soul family very repetitiously. This isn't an exact, it's not true for everyone, but that's how it's connected. And then with the subconsciousness, it's almost as if sometimes our parents kind of take on this role of hurting us in some way when we are very young. And it actually is intentional. You had contracted them. You said, all right, I'm making up this play and I have this problem with a burden. I feel always like a burden and that I need to be perfect in order to receive love or affection or community. And that's the story I need to work out in this lifetime. So if you're going to be my mother or my father, I need to write in the script that very early on, from 0 to 7, you're going to do a few things that's going to trigger that I am a burden. Because I need to get stuck in that loop real early in order to meet the circumstances from the karmic repeat loop to snap me out of it so I can get on with the program, be courageous, move through my grief, and have the beautiful, sunny life that I wanted from day one. But as you can probably imagine, it gets a little bit complicated. And that's just the nature of us healing our karma. So I'm hoping through this long-winded story that you're able to see how knowing what your past lives are, how studying your ancestral experiences, what your grandma went through, what your great-grandparents went through, what land are they from? What was the narrative there? It will actually, and even just knowing about your childhood, instead of being like, yeah, it was okay. It was all right. I don't care about that. I'm living right here, right now. Will actually empower you. Knowing about these things, willing and daring to go there will actually help you heal and create more of that freedom, peace, grounding, loving, successful life that, I'm sure that you dream of. Sure that you dream of. It's worth it to look at these things. It's worth it to invest in what the story is that lives in your blood and in your past and in your story. Because as long as it remains in the dark, it's going to keep you looped into it over and over again without ever recognizing what you do in order to receive love or survival or connection. You're going to forever be the perfectionist. You're going to forever be overly helpful and never be able to ask for help. And eventually that becomes extremely isolating. You're not receiving the love or nourishment that you need. And it's not the point. The point is not to wait for Prince Charming to come and rescue you and show you your worth that you had all along. That's in the fairy tales to disempower you and think that someone's going to see you and someone's going to save you. Like, honestly, the only person that's going to save you is you. So it's worth it to look into these things. It's worth it to understand, but not to become sad about, but to be like, oh, that's why I'm a perfectionist? Oh my God. Okay, well, I'm done with that. Like, let's toss it. I'm just inherently worthy without that bullshit. All right, moving on. And it just goes away. And I don't want to say it just goes away, but I often say the line, reveal it to heal it. And it's because once you see the pattern, you can never unsee it. And suddenly you'll recognize what you're doing. You know it's a waste of energy. It's not going to get you what you want because you've seen the pattern take you places you didn't want to go before. And you will naturally begin to choose something different. What you shine the light on, what you see, you can never unsee. You can turn the light off and walk away, but it's still etched in there. You know. So it is, to me, the first stop in being able to truly heal, truly transcend, truly work out your karma. And to circle it all the way back to the beginning about these things seeping through the timeline, that's kind of what I mean, because technically, just to make it more confusing, time isn't really real. So all these lifetimes are happening at the same time. You don't need to think any more about that because our human brains don't have the concepts to appropriate that. You just need to know that it's all happening at once, just on different TV stations almost, different radio stations. It's all happening right now. You're just tuned into this channel. So let's say just for me. So let's say Kayla in a different channel is also 34 years old, and her 34th year of life is very traumatic. Well, I naturally, in this channel, as Kayla at 34 years old, is going to also experience some of that stuff seeping through. I'll suddenly feel afraid. I'll have circumstances come up that bring me anxiety. I will see loop after loop come forward, and it does sort of seep through with the intention to get your attention and reveal it. But don't think about the time thing too much. It's just that's how it works. So if you want to just leave it in linear time, which is actually my preferred way of working with it, I still prefer to organize the data in a linear way because it just makes more sense to me. I know it's not true, but it makes more sense. And it's really all the same. If you're understanding the concept, then what does it matter? So it kind of means like at the same time, if I had a past life in the medieval era, and at 34 years old, my husband killed me. Well, when I'm 34 in this lifetime, I'm probably going to have some type of issue with a male or a partner. I'm going to experience some type of violence or a near-death experience. And it's going to seep through and try to trigger me into healing that karmic story because Kayla in the medieval story is dead. She can't heal it. Now it's now my responsibility because she no longer has any existence in that reality. I have to deal with it. And that's the name of the karmic game. And so it is a personal journey to set ourselves free, to be able to experience peace, true love, being grounded, finding our sources of nourishment, all these really beautiful things. But it's also greater than us because what we heal in ourselves, we break the line of it being passed on from generation to generation. So we heal the future. We don't pass these coping strategies or survival instincts onto our children. It stops with us. And if you're not having children, we don't pass it on to our nieces and nephews. And regardless, we're still a break in the karmic chain so that it doesn't go on. So it is also greater than us, and it is healing the future. It is changing the future. It is changing the narrative. And I want you to know that wherever you're at on your journey, you're probably exactly where you need to be. And everything that's happened so far needed to happen in order to show you those loops, in order to get you to the place where you're actively healing the story that we don't want to pass on and we don't want to repeat again. So you're where you need to be. And if you can look back at those painful moments and ask yourself, what did I learn from this? How did I grow? Then that's why it happened to you. But on a final note, a lot of those things did seep through in the past Cancer season. They often seep through in the water seasons. So Cancer season, Scorpio season and often Pisces season. And it is in the name of cleansing us, of washing us away from these loops and allowing us to come into the new cycles, which are often fire cycles. The fire comes right after the water because it cleanses us so that we can live more from our fire, which is our heart, our passion, who we truly are, without these things to remain hidden. So it all has a beautiful purpose. It's all happening for you. It's all beautiful. If you are curious and being like, how can I dive into this? Well, I do have actually all my sessions involve healing those past stories. Everything I do involves going into that. So I do have offerings that are karmic clearing, which is exactly that, looking at these loops and letting go of what we can and understanding why. The karmic path session is all about looking at your karmic stories. What did you come here to unveil in this lifetime? How are you connected to the ancestors? Every course I do, aside from Learn the Records, every course I do, we look into those past stories and we illuminate them. Learn the Records just teaches you how to do all this work for yourself instead of needing to purchase a session. But check it out. If not, do some journeys on your own, do some guided meditations, go visit your inner self, go visit a past life, get hypnotized, and let's get this show on the road. Because I did have a dream not that long ago where sort of the Watcher, it's just a dream, but probably more than a dream, where it's these beings that were watching over planet Earth had actually come down and they were sort of studying something very closely. And they were looking at Earth, and I said, what do you see? Why the fascination? And they said, something very peculiar is happening on planet Earth right now. And I, so, well, what's that? And they said that there are these old survival programs being triggered very heavily in your collective, and it's very fascinating to us. And I said, why would it be triggered? And they said, well, these survival programs always happen when we feel threatened or scared, or we have to kick it into fight, flight, and freeze in order to survive. So it showed me something very important that the collective is experiencing on a greater scale. And it's that people are feeling like they have to go into survival mode right now. And if we just think about that, there are a lot of challenging things traveling through the collective right now. The prices and the cost of living is through the roof. There's been more shocking health experiences coming. I know so many people who have gotten sick and passed away, and people are unexpectedly ill often. People that are too young and don't have any reason to be. There's this worry for our future, our children. What is social media doing to them? How are they ever going to afford a house? Can we put them through college? How can we pay our own mortgage? How can we travel? How can we do these things? Not to mention politics, not to mention the extreme weather. I don't know about you guys, but I'm in Canada, and it feels like all of Canada's on fire right now. And it's scary. And so I think people are really seeing these fight, flight, freeze, sabotage, be perfect, be really helpful, these old programs are really being triggered right now because it is challenging to live in this time and place. But I want you to just remember one thing, that we are all awakening. We are all healing. We're coming back to spirituality. We're coming back to acceptance. We're coming back to love. We're coming back to peace. The prophecies are here. This is the tipping point where things could become very beautiful. And there are a lot of people who have really profited off of us not being empowered. And these people, these experiences are going to fight really hard to keep us disempowered because it threatens their way of being. Just as simple as, how many people do you see on TikTok or Instagram or whatever that have chickens? How many people do you know that randomly have like chickens and goats now? Like, so many people. I know people in real life, and I also see a ridiculous amount of people online going back to these ways in which they're creating self-sufficiency. Well, that puts a damper on even like the food industry. People don't need to buy eggs. People don't need to buy poultry anymore. and sales go down. That's frightening. So let's just keep people disempowered. It's just as simple as that. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's just as simple as that. And just a little anecdote to share with you about how much effort and energy is really put into conning us into spending money. And this is just one example, and I'm sure there's even more. If you have more, drop it in the comments. Send me a message. I'd love to talk about more of that. If you're someone who specializes in marketing research, like, please reach out to me. I would love to have a chat. But when I was in high school, there was somebody who came from like the Art Institute in Vancouver who was, trying to get new high school graduates to enroll in their program. And I don't really remember how we got to this teaching, but they did talk about, different jobs or careers you could have if you had this background in artistry. And one of them was marketing and marketing research. And he showed us some data that was them studying what different colors elicit energetically or emotionally from humans. And they said, blue makes people feel very calm and peaceful, and they typically will stay in an environment for a long time because they feel welcome there. Yellow is an uncomfortable color, and it makes people feel a little bit agitated, and they actually spent less time in the room because it was yellow. Red randomly makes people feel hungry. Green kind of had two effects. It made people think about like money, but it also made people kind of calm and really grounded, earth type things. And then he said to us, what do you think every fast food chain uses in their marketing colors? Red and yellow. Mostly red makes you hungry, but also yellow because they want you to get the heck out. Come in, get your food, don't stay, leave. And if you really do just think about fast food chains, like I can think of 3 off the top of my head that are red and yellow. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So that's just a lot of market research. And it obviously goes into practice. So you don't think that they're studying trends. You don't think that they're studying what's going on. And you don't think that they would do some things to like try to get you to come back to needing them, right? So don't look at it as a bad thing. To me, it feels bad to be in survival mode. It feels bad for life to be this hard right now. But to me, it's also indicative of the fact that we are reclaiming our power, we are healing, we are releasing these old sabotaging stories, and they're here to just trigger as many as they can to keep us in these loops of consumerism. We're a capitalist community, supply and demand, or society. It's how it works. And it does threaten the very fabric of our society if we're not in a supply and demand consumerism way of being. So I digress. My main premise for this was that when you are feeling those emotions or things do bleed to the surface or you feel uncomfortable or you have an experience that causes you some pain, do some honest reflecting. Really sit with yourself and ask yourself, what is this emotion teaching me? What is this? What is triggering it? And it's not to go into the river and drown yourself by trying to chase it upstream. Where does emotion come from? Sometimes it can just be witnessed and released. Interesting. I feel upset. Interesting. When my brother was in town, I really felt agitated. I wonder what that means about where I'm not honoring my truth or myself in those moments with my own brother. It doesn't have to be this mystery that you waste a bunch of time on. But the sooner that you are aware of why you do the things you do, especially if they don't light you up or make you feel good, the sooner we can move into a freer way of being where we are experiencing true peace, true joy, true love, true acceptance, and we are healing the future. So that's how it's all connected, and that's why it happens. And that consciousness, that turning the light on and choosing the other thing, knowing that you're just inherently worthy even on your worst day, will change this world. Will change your world and will change the future. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.